Adobe Shockwave is a multimedia platform for building interactive multimedia applications and video games. Content is developed with Adobe Director and published on the Internet. Such content can be viewed in a web browser on any computer with the Shockwave Player plugin installed. It was first developed by Macromedia, and released in 1995 and was later acquired by Adobe Systems in 2005. Shockwave supports raster graphics, basic vector graphics, 3D graphics, audio, and an embedded scripting language called Lingo. Shockwave is a common format for CD-ROM projectors, kiosk presentations, and interactive video games, and dominated the interactive multimedia product space during the 1990s. Various graphic adventure games were developed with Shockwave during the 1990s, including the Journeyman project, Total Distortion, Mia's Language Adventure, Mia's Science Adventure, and the Didi and Ditto series. Hundreds of free online video games were developed using Shockwave, and published on websites such as Miniclip and Shockwave.com. As of July 2011, a survey found that Flash Player had 99% market penetration in desktop browsers in mature markets, while Shockwave Player claimed only 41% in these markets. As of 2008, Adobe Flash and Adobe AI are preferred alternatives to Shockwave, with its 3D rendering capabilities, object-oriented programming language, and capacity to run as a native executable on multiple platforms. History Macromedia Shockwave originated with a VideoWorks application developed by Macromedia for the original Apple Macintosh. Animations were initially limited to the black and white of early Macintosh screens. VideoWorks was rebranded as Director 1.0 in 1987. Director 2.2 was released in 1988, and included the Lingo scripting language with extensibility provided by extras. A Windows version was available in the early 1990s. Director 3.0 was the last version by Macromedia, and released in 1989, which introduced objects to Lingo. Shockwave Player had still not been developed, and the sole means of publishing content remained generating executable applications. Macromedia In 1993, Macromedia acquired Macromedia, and took over the development of the Shockwave platform. As the Internet became more popular, Macromedia realized the potential for a web-based multimedia platform, and designed Shockwave Player for the leading web browser of the time, Netscape Navigator. Shockwave Player was released with Director 4.0 around 1995, and branded Shockwave Player 1.0. Its versioning has since been tied to Director's versioning, skipping versions 2 to 4. Shockwave was now a two-part system, a graphics and animation editor known as Macromedia Director, and a player known as Macromedia Shockwave Player. Macromedia Director quickly became the de facto production tool for the multimedia industry, and throughout the 1990s it was credited with the creation of the majority of educational CD-ROMs. Director was preferred over competing applications due to its range of features, relative ease of use and its ability to publish executables for both Apple and Microsoft operating systems. Point-and-click graphic adventure games were common at the time, and Director was commonly used to develop such titles. From 1995 to 1997 a competing multimedia authoring program appeared called Metropolis. In 1997, Metropolis was purchased and buried by Quark, Incorporated, who had its own plans into multimedia authoring with Quark Media. In November 1996, Macromedia acquired Future Wave Software and its Future Splash products. Macromedia Flash 1.0 was released shortly thereafter. Macromedia now control two of the three leading multimedia platforms for the web, with Java being the third. Macromedia Director 8.5 was released in 2001 and was the first version to specifically target the video game industry. It introduced 3D capabilities, 3D text, toon shading, havoc physics, real video, real audio, integration with Macromedia Flash 5, behaviors, and other enhancements. 3D modeling programs such as Lightwave, Cinema 4D and 3D Studio Max were upgraded to export 3D models for Shockwave. As of 2001, over 200 million people had the Macromedia Shockwave Player installed, making Shockwave a common format for online video games. Websites such as Miniclip and Shockwave.com were dedicated to Shockwave and Flash-based video games. Adobe Macromedia was acquired by Adobe Systems in 2005, and the entire Macromedia product line including Flash, Dreamweaver, Director Shockwave and Author was now handled by Adobe. Director and Shockwave Player is currently developed and distributed by Adobe Systems. The early 2000s saw a demise in the usage of Director Shockwave, and most multimedia professionals preferred Macromedia Flash and other competing platforms. After the Adobe acquisition, no new versions were released for 4 years. In 2007, Adobe released Adobe Director 11, the first new release in 4 years. It introduced DirectX 9 native 3D rendering and the AGIA PhysX physics engine, panel docking, QuickTime 7 support, Windows Media and Real Player support, Adobe Flash CS3 integration and Unicode support. It was considered an incremental release by reviewers and the scripting editor was still considered primitive. As of 2008, the market position of Director Shockwave overlapped with Flash to a high degree, the only advantage of Director being its native 3D capabilities. However, with the release of Flash Player 11, GPU-based 3D rendering was now supported using Stage 3D, Away 3D or Flare 3D. And after Adobe AI was released, Flash programs could now be published as native applications, further reducing the need for Director. Extras are plugins for the Lingo scripting language, that enable additional functionality into a Shockwave project. Extras are typically used to add file system I/O, hardware integration, and advanced multimedia functions. Extras are supported and available for Adobe Director, Adobe Author and Adobe Freehand. Many of Director's own functions are implemented as extras. Extras use the Macromedia open architecture which was designed to allow easy creation of interchangeable components between Macromedia products. Adobe maintains a list of third-party extras. Extras for Microsoft Windows have an X32 file extension. Extras for Mac OS generally have an XTR extension. The file extension X16 is reserved for extras for Microsoft Windows. See also, Adobe Flash, Adobe AIR, Adobe Reader, Microsoft XNA, Microsoft Silverlight. References. External links, Adobe Shockwave Player, Adobe Director, Adobe Extras.